Hello everyone and welcome to the chapter number 46 of Blender Master Course Geometry Nodes Part 1 of Creating Dragons. In this chapter and the upcoming chapter, we'll be learning about lots of new geometry nodes, and by using them, we'll be creating a beautiful scene with some dragons. And in today's chapter, we'll be understanding all these topics in complete detail. And yes, if you are new to this course, then do check out the previous 46 chapters from the link of the playlist in the pinned comment. So to begin with, let's first go to the Geometry Nodes workspace, and now we'll be making some flying dragons like this one using Geometry Nodes. Now for making the dragons, I'll delete this cube by pressing X. Now let's add a curve in the scene. So press Shift plus A, go to curve and select the Bezier curve. Let's go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, and to give it some thickness, go to the Geometry Nodes editor, click on the new button, and now we'll be adding the curve to mesh node. So press Shift plus A, go to curve, and in operations, select the curve to mesh node. We'll place it over here, and for the profile curve, we'll be using the curve circle node. So I will press Shift plus A, go to curve, then in primitives, select the curve circle node. Now we'll connect it to the profile curve. Now to fix the radius of the curve, we'll be using the set curve radius node. So press Shift plus A, go to curve, and in the right category, select the set curve radius. Let's place it over here, and by using the radius value, we can control the radius of the curve. Now to make the radius look like it's smaller at one end and bigger at the other end, we'll be using the spline parameter node. So press Shift plus A, go to curve, and in the read category, select the spline parameter node. We'll place it over here and connect the factor socket to the radius. Now if I tab into the edit mode, press A to select everything, then press X to delete and select delete segments. And then if we try to draw a curve by selecting the draw tool from here, and now if I try to draw a curve like this, then you can see here that the same thing is being applied to this curve also. Now this curve is created, which will be used as the body of the dragon, and to fill this face of the curve, simply turn on the fill caps option here. Now we'll be placing the dragon's head on this face of the mesh. But first of all, we'll convert this mesh into points, and for this we'll be using the mesh to points node. So press Shift plus A, go to mesh, and in operations, select the mesh to points node. Let's place it over here. Now this mesh to points node converted the vertices of the mesh into points. However, if I change the mode to faces, then in this case, each face of the mesh will be converted into a point. Now to get the point only on that face where we wanted to add the dragon's head, we'll be using another node, which is the face area node. So to add it here, press Shift plus A, go to mesh, and in the read category, select the face area. Let's place it over here. Now this face area node is simply used to compare the area of different faces. However, to use it practically, we also need to add the compare node. So press Shift plus A, go to utilities, and in math, select the compare node. We'll place it over here. Now I'll connect the area socket to the value A. Let's also come out of the edit mode, and now you can see here that with the mesh to points node and the faces selected here, we are having these points in place of the different faces of the mesh. And by using the face area node, we'll be comparing the area of each of the faces in order to get only that point where we want to place the head of the dragon. So if I take the result socket and connect it to the selection, then in this case, this compare node with the greater than operation selected will only give the result of those faces who are having a face area greater than the value of B, which is 0. And if I begin to slightly increase this value, then you will notice that the number of these points are reducing, and that's because those particular faces where these points were placed were not having a face area greater than this value of B. So if I further increase it to something like 0.05 or 0.06, then you will now notice that we have only one point left in the scene, and this is exactly that point where we need to place the head of the dragon. Now to view the rest of the body along with this point, we'll be using the join geometry node. So press Shift plus A, go to geometry, and select the join geometry node. Let's place it over here and connect the mesh socket of the curve to mesh node to the join geometry. Now we have this body of the dragon along with this point on that face where we'll be placing the dragon's head. Now to make the head of the dragon, let's add a cube in the scene. So press Shift plus A, go to mesh, and select the cube, press G, X, and move it over here. Now to apply the subdivision to it, go to the modifier properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate category, select the subdivision surface modifier. Let's increase the levels viewport to a value of 2. Let's also apply this modifier from here, and now to convert it into a dragon head, we'll be doing the changes in the edit mode. First of all, on the top right side, you can see this butterfly icon, which is the mesh symmetry option. And suppose I click on the Y axis, now whatever changes I'll do on any one side of the mesh, it will also get reflected on the other side in the Y axis. So it's basically used to create symmetry in the mesh while editing. Now let's undo it, and we'll be keeping this Y axis turned on. Now let's make a simple dragon head. So I'll select a vertex at the top right side, then press O to turn on the proportional editing, then press G to move it like this. Let's also reduce the size of the proportional editing tool by using the scroll wheel. Let's move this point over here slightly upwards, and then left click to finalize. Also I select this point, press G, Z, and move it slightly down like this. And yes, we will be making only a basic structure of the dragon's head. We won't be going into too much detail. And now for the front part, I'll select this vertex, press G, X and move it forward like this. Let's also go to the back of the head, select any vertex, press G, X and let's make it flat like this. Let's also increase the proportional size and then left click to finalize. Now let's make the eyes of the dragon. So first of all, turn off the mesh symmetry in the Y axis. Also turn off the proportional editing. Press 3 for the face select mode. Now for the eyes, I'll be selecting these two faces by holding the shift button. Let's extrude them inwards by pressing E and then move your cursor like this and left click to finalize. Now the basic structure of the head is almost ready. So let's come out of the edit mode, select the body, and to place the head as an instance on this point, we'll be using the instance on points node. So press shift plus A, go to instances and select the instance on points, place it after the mesh to points node, and for the instance object, we'll be using this head that we created here. So go to the scene collection, we have this cube here which is the head of the dragon. We'll drag it into the geometry nodes editor, then I'll take the geometry socket and connect it to the instance. Now first of all, let's adjust the position properly. So I'll select the head, tab into the edit mode, press A to select everything. Let's move it in the X axis like this and then left click to finalize. Now let's also reduce the radius of this body, or basically its size. So I'll go to the curve circle node, let's reduce the radius from here and we'll be keeping it to something like 0.5, and this is how it looks now. Now moving ahead, we'll be adding some spikes on the head of the dragon. So for this, I'll select the original dragon head, then if I press shift plus A, then go to curve, then here we can see that we have a curve object which is named as empty here. So I'll select it, and now in the geometry nodes editor, you can see here that we are having a completely new node which is the deform curves on surface node. Now if I go to the scene collection, then you can see here that in front of the cube object we are having this empty hair icon, and if I expand it, then here we are having the curves object which is simply the empty hair that we added. Now the deform curves on surface node simply allows you to deform the hair curves which are added on the surface of an object. In this case, this head of the dragon will be the surface and we'll be using the hair curves in order to make the spikes on the head of dragon. Now with the curves object selected, if I try to change the mode from here, then we have three options available: the object mode, edit mode and the sculpt mode. You can even press Ctrl plus tab and select any of these three modes, and yes, in order to modify the hair, we need to open the sculpt mode. Now in the sculpt mode, we are having a completely different layout. On the top we have the option to control the radius or the strength of the brush. Then here on the left hand side, we have lots of different tools, and to view them properly, we'll close this spreadsheet window. So I'll take my cursor over here, right click and select join areas. Let's close this window, and now to expand this menu, I'll left click and drag like this, and in this way we can clearly see all the tools along with the names. Now to add the hair particles, we'll go to the brush settings or this toolbar and select this add tool, and now if I left click and drag my cursor like this, then these hair particles will get added on the surface of the mesh. So you can use the hair node system when you're making a 3D character and want to give some hair to it. In fact, you have many other options too, like if I select the comb and then left click and drag like this, then you can see here that it kind of combs the hair. Similarly, if I select the snake hook and then left click and drag like this, then this is how it will modify the hair. But suppose you want to remove this hair, then select the delete and left click and drag like this. Now we'll be using this hair in order to create the spikes on the head of the dragon. So first of all, let's select the add. Then for the symmetry, I'll turn on the mesh symmetry in the Y axis, and now let's draw some hair on the surface. So I'll left click over here, let's add some more hair. And yes, one more thing, if I simply left click one time, then only one hair particle will get added. However, if I left click and drag like this, then multiple hair particles will get added on the surface. So in this case, we won't be creating too many hair particles, like we'll only require about 10 or 15 hair particles on both the sides, something like this. Now after drawing the hair particles, let's go back to the object mode, and now to give them some thickness, or basically to convert them into a mesh, we'll be using the curve to mesh node. So press shift plus A, go to curve, and in operations, select the curve to mesh node. Let's place it over here, and now for the profile curve, we'll be using the curve circle node. So press shift plus A, go to curve, and in primitives, select the curve circle node. Let's connect it to the profile curve like this. Let's reduce the radius to something like 0.1 or 0.2. Let's also add the set curve radius node. So press shift plus A, go to curve, then in the right category, select the set curve radius node. Let's place it over here, and then for the radius, we'll again be using the spline parameter node. So press shift plus A, go to curve, and in the read category, select the spline parameter node. Let's place it over here and connect the factor socket to the radius. Now since we are making the spikes, as a result, we need to invert the radius, and for this we'll be using the map range node. So press shift plus A, go to Utilities, and in Math, select the Map Range node. We'll place it after the spline parameter node, and now to invert the effect, simply change the 2 min value to 1 and the 2 max value to 0. And with this we have these simple spikes ready on the dragon's head. To give them some more detail, we'll go to the sculpt mode again. So press Ctrl plus Tab, select the sculpt mode. Now with the add option selected, if I left click anywhere on the surface, then these spikes will get added there. And for the detailing, we'll be using the snake hook tool. So let's select it. Also let's go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad, or maybe Ctrl plus 1 to view the opposite side. Now if I left click and drag my cursor like this, then you can see here that it's creating this amazing effect on the hair particles. Let's do the same with the remaining ones also, and in this way we'll be making the spikes for the head of the dragon. So we'll complete it like this, and yes, do ensure that the mesh symmetry in the y-axis is turned on so that whatever changes you do on one of the sides also gets applied to the other side. I think that we should also delete some of the hair particles, so I'll select the delete tool. Let's remove some of them by left clicking, and this is how it looks now. We have this simple looking dragon head where we added some hair particles and then also converted them into these spikes. Now let's also go back to the object mode again, and one thing that you might have noticed here is that these hair particles that we created are not visible on the head of this dragon. So to solve this problem, I'll select it, and here we have added the instance on points node, and we connected it to this object info node, which is having this cube object, or basically the original dragon head. Now to have the hair curves also, we'll be using the geometry to instance node. So press shift plus A, go to geometry and select the geometry to instance. We'll place it over here. Let's also bring in the hair particles or this curves object by dragging it like this. We'll connect it to the geometry to instance node, and with this we have these hair particles or these spikes added on the dragon's head. Now moving ahead, if I select the dragon, go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, turn on the edit mode, and with the draw tool turned on, if I try to draw a curve like this, then you can see here that I can easily draw as many dragons as I want. However, we have another issue here, which is that the rotation of the head is not properly aligned, and to solve this we'll be using the align Euler to vector node, and we'll also be capturing the attribute of the face normals. So let's do it practically. First of all, let's add the align Euler to vector node by pressing shift plus A, then in the utilities, select this one and select the align Euler to vector node. Let's place it over here, connect it to the rotation, and now for the proper alignment, we need to capture the attribute of each of the face normals, and for this we'll be using the capture attribute node. If you remember, in one of the previous chapters, we discussed about the capture attribute node in complete detail. However, in the latest Blender version, it's slightly updated, so let's add it and understand how it works now. So press shift plus A, go to attribute and select the capture attribute node. We'll place it after the curve to mesh node where it is connecting with the mesh to points node. Previously, this capture attribute node used to have a value socket for the input and an attribute socket for the output. But now, in the updated version, it allows you to do the same thing but on your own. So first of all, I'll change the domain to the face, and to calculate the face normal, we need the input in the capture attribute node to be the normal. So press shift plus A, then in geometry and in the read category, select the normal node. We'll place it over here and connect the normal socket to this input socket in the capture attribute node. And by doing this, it is now capturing the attribute of the face normal, and for the output, we have this socket over here. So let's take this socket and connect it to the vector in the align Euler to vector node. And now you can see here that the rotation is now properly fixed and all the dragon heads are properly aligned. And yes, one more thing, even after doing all these steps, if the rotation is still not properly aligned, then you can try to change the axis in the align Euler to vector node. But in my case, the x-axis is working with the pivot set to auto. So you can try to change the axis or the pivot until you obtain the perfect alignment. Now moving ahead, let's also give some wings to the dragon. So come out of the edit mode, press 7 to go to the top view, and to make the wings, let's add a plane. So press shift plus A, go to mesh and select the plane, press G, X and move it over here. Let's tab into the edit mode, press 2 for edge select mode, select this edge, let's scale it down in the Y axis. So press S, Y and scale it down like this. Now let's add some loop cuts. So press Ctrl plus R, left click and move it over here. Let's add another one by pressing Ctrl plus R, then left click and move it over here. Let's add 2 more loop cuts for the center. So press Ctrl plus R, left click and move it slightly upwards. Let's add one last loop cut by pressing Ctrl plus R, left click and move it over here. Or maybe I think that we should add 2 more loop cuts, one of them on the top side here and the other one at the bottom. So press Ctrl plus R, add a loop cut over here, then press Ctrl plus R again and add another loop cut over here. Now press 1 for the vertex select mode. I'll select this vertex, press G, X and move it like this. Let's do the same with this one also. Move it in the X axis like this. And now if if I change the angle, then you can see that the wing is completely flat right now. To give it a 3D look, press 3 for the face select mode. I'll select this face, then with the shift key hold it, select the middle face and this one also. Let's extrude them in the Z axis by pressing E and extrude it like this. Now let's come out of the edit mode, and to give it a better final look, we'll be using the subdivision surface modifier. So go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate category, select the subdivision surface. Let's increase the levels viewport to a value of 2, and with this, we have this simple wing ready for the dragon. Let's also apply the shade smooth, and it now looks perfect. So we created this wing just by using a plane, scaling down one of its edge, then we added some loop cuts and extruded up some of the faces in the Z axis. Then we applied the subdivision surface modifier, and this is the final result. Now to complete the pair of wings, tap into the edit mode, press A to select everything, move it in the X axis like this, and do ensure that this origin point is visible here and it will be at the center of both the wings. So let's create a duplicate of this wing by pressing Shift plus P, move it in the X axis like this, and to rotate it, press RZ and type 180 and enter to confirm. And now we have both the wings ready. Now let's place these wings on the dragons. So I'll select the dragon, and now we'll be adding an instance on points node. For this, I'll select this one which we use for the dragon and the dragon head. Press Shift plus D to create a duplicate. Let's place it over here. Then for the points, we'll take the geometry socket in the group input node and connect it to the points. Let's connect the output to the join geometry node, and for the instance, we'll be using the wings. So in the scene collection, these wings are saved as plane. So let's select the dragon. Then in the scene collection, left click and drag the plane into the geometry nodes editor. Now I'll connect the geometry socket to the instance, and with this we have these wings added as the instance on different points of the curve or the dragon. Now first of all, let's fix the scaling of these wings. In the beginning, near the head of the dragon, the size of the wing should be bigger, and then it should reduce as it approaches the end. So to achieve this result, we'll be using this spline parameter node. So I'll take the factor socket and connect it to the scale, and this is how it looks now. And moving ahead, let's also fix the rotation of the wings, and for this purpose, we'll again be using the align Euler to vector node along with the capture attribute node. So first of all, I'll select the align Euler to vector node, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate. Let's place it over here. I'll connect it to the rotation in the instance on points. Then for the attribute, let's select the capture attribute node, press Shift plus D to create a duplicate and place it in between the group input node and the instance on points. Now if you remember, while fixing the rotation of the dragon's head, we used the capture attribute node and connected it to the normal in order to calculate the face normal. However, in this case, we have added these wings on the points of the curve, and as a result, for the capture attribute node, the input that we're going to use will be the curve tangent node. To add it here, press Shift plus A, go to curve, and in the read category, select the curve tangent node. Let's place it over here and connect it to the empty socket in the capture attribute node. Now let's also change the domain to point, and then I'll connect the output to the align Euler to vector node. Now to get the proper alignment, we need to change the axis to align the vector and this pivot axis. However, right now, with the Y axis selected here and the pivot set to auto, I'm getting the perfect alignment. However, it might be possible in your case that you want to change the axis or maybe the pivot point to something else depending upon how your scene is set up. But for now, I'll change the pivot back to auto, and this is how it looks. Now one more thing to notice here is that the first wing is placed at the beginning of the curve where we have the head of the dragon, and to solve this problem, we'll be using the trim curve node. So press Shift plus A, go to curve, and in operations, select the trim curve node. Place it after the capture attribute node and before the instance on points, and by using this node, we can basically cut or trim the curve depending upon the starting and the ending value. For example, if I try to increase the starting value, then you will notice that the wings on this side of the curve will begin to disappear because we have trimmed the curve. However, if I change the start value back to 0 and try to reduce the end value, then in this case, the same effect is seen from this side of the curve. So for now, I'll keep the end value to something like 0.96 or 0.97, and this is how it looks now. Now let's also give some material to the dragon, and for this, let's go to the material properties and create a new material. Let's change its name to dragon and enter to confirm. Now let's also add the set material node in the geometry nodes editor. So press Shift plus A, go to material and select the set material node. We'll place it after this curve to mesh node which is connecting to the join geometry node. Let's select the dragon material, and now to modify the material, let's go to the shader editor from here and also turn on the render view. Now to improve the lighting in the scene, I'll select this light in the scene collection. In the object data properties, change the type of light to sun, reduce the brightness to something like 4 or 5. Now let's select the dragons again, and in the shader editor, let's add the Warner texture. So press Shift plus A, go to texture and select the Warner texture, place it over here, press Ctrl plus T to connect it to the texture coordinate and the mapping node. Now just like always, I'll take the object socket and connect it to the vector. Then for the output, I'll connect the distance socket to the base color, and now we have this texture with the spots on the dragon. Now to get the scale texture that we do see on the bodies of snakes and dragons, simply go go to the Warner texture. Then in the second option, which is the feature output, select the distance to edge. And now you can see that we are having this scaled pattern applied on the dragon's body. Now to give some color to the texture, let's add a color ramp. So press Shift plus A, go to converter and select the color ramp. Let's place it over here. Let's change the first color and we'll be keeping the dark green color. Similarly, for the second color, let's change it to the light green color, and now this is how the texture looks. Let's also increase the roughness to a value of 1, and to give it a 3D look, we'll be using the bump node. So press Shift plus A, go to vector and select the bump node, place it over here, connect the normal to the normal in the principal BSTF, and for the input, take the distance socket of the Warner texture and connect it to the height in the bump node. Let's reduce the strength to something like 0.3 or 0.4, and now the texture looks like this. Now let's also give the material to the wings. So let's select the original wings. Now go to the shader editor and click on the new button. Let's also change the name of this material to wings, and now let's add the Warner texture. So press Shift plus A, go to texture and select the Warner texture. Let's place it over here. Press Ctrl plus T to connect the texture coordinate and the mapping node. Now take the object socket and connect it to the vector. Let's also connect the distance socket of the Warner texture to the base color. Now just like the texture on the dragon's body, I'll change the feature output from F1 to distance to edge, and now to give it some colors, we'll be adding the color ramp node. So press Shift plus A, go to converter and select the color ramp, place it over here. Now I'll select the second pointer. Let's change the color to something like red, and this is how the wings look. If you want, you can set any other color that you like, maybe green color, maybe yellow or blue color, but for now I'll be assigning the red color. Let's also increase the roughness to a value of 1. Now let's also give some material to the dragon's head. So for this, I'll select the original dragon head, which is this cube in the scene collection, and we'll give it the same material that we have assigned to the body of the dragon. So in the shader editor, click here and select the dragon material, and now this is how the dragon head looks now. And yes, if you want to do some changes in this material which is specifically applied to the dragon's head, then you can click on this icon, which will create a duplicate of this material, and now if I do any changes in the material, then it will only get applied to the dragon's head. However, I think that the original material looks perfect, so I won't do any changes. But for the eyes, we'll be creating a new material and will increase the emission strength in it. So with the original head of the dragon selected, tab into the edit mode. Now select those two faces which we extruded in for the eyes. So I'll select this face, and with the shift key hold it, select this face, go to the material properties, and let's create a new material and click on the assign button. Let's go to the emission and increase the emission strength to something like 10, and I'll change the emission color to yellow. Now let's come out of the edit mode, and this is how the dragon is looking right now. We created this simple texture for the dragon's body and the head, then we created this red texture for the wings, and for the eyes we have used this material with the yellow emission. If you want, you can even change the color of this emission to something else like red or blue, and to see the emission effect properly, I'll change the render engine from EV to cycles, and this is how our scene looks. Finally, let's also give some material to these hair particles or the spikes that we created. So I'll select them, go to the shader editor and create a new material. Also, to assign this material to these particles, go to the geometry nodes editor from here. Let's add a set material node. So press Shift plus A, go to material and select the set material node, place it after the curve to mesh, and from here I'll select the material node 001. Now let's go back to the shader editor again, and for the texture we'll be using the noise texture. So press Shift plus A, go to texture and select the noise texture, place it over here, press Ctrl plus T for the texture coordinate and the mapping node, connect the object to the vector, and for the output I'll connect the factor socket to the base color. Now to give some colors to it, we'll use the color ramp. So press Shift plus A, go to converter and select the color ramp. Let's place it over here. Now I'll take this black pointer of the color ramp and move it like this. In this way, we'll add some more black color to these horns or the spikes. I'll also change the render engine back to EV for now, and right now I think that the texture looks fine, so I'll be finalizing this one. However, if you want, you can change the color of this texture to something else like red, green or blue or anything else which you think would look the best for your scene. But for now, I'll change it back to the black color, and with this we come to the end of this chapter. In today's chapter, we learnt about some new geometry nodes, created some amazing dragons, then we even understood about the hair nodes which we use for creating these spikes. We even created these wings and also created these amazing textures. And the best part about using geometry nodes is that if I select these dragons and tab into the edit mode, then with the draw tool enabled, if I draw a curve like this, then I can easily make a dragon out of it. So try to play around with these things, try to give some more details to the geometry of the wings or the head of the dragon, or maybe you can try to give some different colors to the dragon, and in this way you will be able to create a scene of your own. And yes, in the next chapter we'll be learning about some more geometry nodes, and we'll also use them in order to finalize our scene. So our next chapter will be the chapter number 47, Geometry Nodes Part 2 of Creating Dragons. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, press that notification bell so that you can get timely updates about the upcoming chapters. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.